Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Power of Rebellion uh, uh, conversation that we're going to have today. I was totally going to try and do this without my readers, but I can't see everybody clearly. So here we go. Yay, middle age. I am Dr. Melissa Bird, and I am an Episcopal lay preacher, author, healer, and witch. I am a descendant of the Shivwit clan of the Southern Paiutes of the Utah and Arizona desert, and I live in Corvallis, Oregon. My very presence on this earth is in and of itself an act of rebellion, and I am so pleased to be joined by some of my favorite rebellious people that I have connected with, not just through the Passionistas, but through my work in the world. And so I'm so happy to have everybody here. I wanted to talk a little bit about acts of rebellion and how we explore the power of rebellion. I really want to encourage everyone who's here and listening to think about the ultimate rebellion of love and how we can disrupt the status quo and engage in connection and bridging the gaps between all of us when we disrupt outside of traditional norms of fighting and protest and arguing and yelling, traditional as in the power structure defining that way, and thinking about how we can focus on the collective. One of the things I loved about the previous panel was that they started talking about decolonization being the pathway to inclusion. And I feel like engaging in acts of rebellion is another way to really disrupt the industry of diversity, equity, and inclusion to get us to a place where we can have authentic conversations and shift the structure of power and deliberation. So I'm so excited to have all of you with us here today. And I am going to start. Hi, Alyssa. I'm excited too. I'm going to start by asking Kara to introduce yourself and talk to us about your maybe a small little story of rebellion for you and what it means.
Hi, I'm Kara Reedy. I'm the director of the Disabled Journalists Association. I am a journalist, and I fell into journalism kind of just completely by accident. My whole life has sort of been rebellion. I'm a dwarf, and most dwarfs are really considered to be, and I don't think most people realize this, we're considered to be kind of subhuman. So no one's really looking for us or looking for us to do anything. So even in grade school, to get to do double dutch sometimes was a complication, not because I couldn't do it, but because people had decided I couldn't do it. So we would sit and have arguments about whether I could do it or not. And then I would do it, and they're like, oh, you can actually do that. Yes. It's really just you who thought I couldn't. But when I went to college, I was in the theater department, and they again were just like, oh, you can't be an actor because no one will hire you. So we're not going to really invest time or money into teaching you, even though I was paying them. So in essence, they were kind of stealing money from me. So I've had periods of time where I've fought and where I've kind of given up. And theater was one of the things that I gave up. But when I got to journalism by accident, I realized I was really good at it. And it wasn't something anyone could take away, although they tried. And I was at CNN for 10 years, and they spent the entire 10 years telling me I couldn't be a journalist and don't call myself that because I'm not one. And that is one of my biggest acts of rebellion, because I think I was just at that point tired. I was like, okay, you said I couldn't do theater. Now you're saying I can't do journalism, which there's literally no height requirement for that. All you need is your brain and to ask questions. And so I fought it, and I fought them. And then I realized I needed to leave there in order to really fight the fight. And once I left, that was the biggest act of rebellion, was because they were like, well, I guess you're going to get another assistant job. Good for you. and now I'm got a grant from Ford to start the Disabled Journalists Association. I go into newsrooms that I've been in and worked in, and I'm training them how to do
Yes.
it.
So
So,
good.
and they have to come.
Ellen!
They have to come to me. Like, it's not optional anymore. It's like, oh, nope, she's the one that you go to for training on this, and you have to. It's very interesting to watch some people that I knew early on come back and be like, oh, could you help us? Sure, no problem.
So good. Thank you so much. Crystal, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello. I am on the East Coast, so I keep saying good evening, but I recognize that it may not be evening for everyone. So hello at some point during your day today. I'm so glad to be here. And of course, thank you, Melissa, for inviting me and having this opportunity. My name is Crystal Lenise Walker, and I have kind of two roles. My main role is serving as a senior director for a nonprofit organization, MLT, Management Leadership for Tomorrow. And I run the Racial Equity at Work initiative, which are we have two programs, Black Equity at Work, as well as Hispanic Equity at Work, that just launched last week. But we developed the first ever programs that help hold partners, companies, employers across this country accountable for racial equity, by setting real targets, by not having a hosh-posh, everybody says they're doing a great job, but providing them with support to actually kind of hold themselves accountable to the commitments that we've seen in the past. But my passion work, which is perfect, I actually run my own passion consulting firm. And it's me doing work that I love with clients based on my passions, and what I'm interested in and how I can be of help. And there I focus on racial equity in the workplace as well, but I look at it through a lens of making sure that Black women are at the center of those conversations and that their voices are heard, but more importantly, that their needs are met. And even that work is an act of rebellion, because there's this idea that we need to focus on others and that will somehow trickle down to everyone else. But what we know historically, what we know in our hearts for those of us who experience this as Black women, we know that when Black women are the focus, everybody else around us benefits, oftentimes at our own detriment or at the slower pace of our own benefit. And that is why that's important for me to center that. To talk about an act of rebellion, it really reminds me of a story I've shared before. I grew up in North Carolina in the rural South. I loved where I grew up. I had a great family, lots of aunts, uncles, mom, dad, siblings. And my mother was a teacher assistant, and she taught at this elementary school, the elementary school I attended. And of course, I started kindergarten a little bit ahead because I had a mother who made me read over the summer and do flashcards, right? Everyone else was playing in the mud. I had to do that before I could go play in the mud. And so when I started kindergarten, I was reading more than most kindergarteners coming in. And what would often happen was that I would become bored. Whatever sheet, whatever activity, I was done in a few moments. And oftentimes I would try to go help my classmates. But what would happen instead was that I was told that I was being distracting or that I wasn't the teacher and I needed to sit down. And so I spent a lot of kindergarten in the corner or out in the hallway. So much to the point where there were times that my mom would walk by because she's teaches there. And I would say, Mom, I'm out in the hallway again. And she would just walk by me like she didn't see me at that point. But where that all came to a head was that, and this was back when there were different ways that we tried to praise kids and tried to give them encouragement. But they used to keep track of our reading level and like how many books we had read and what we were doing. And we all had a tiger. And the tiger was in the hallway. So of course, now that I think about that, that's mortifying for every kid to have a tiger. And that tiger was moving to a finish line of growth. And so like everyone knew where your growth. But for me, I saw it as a marker because my little tiger was in the front. And so I knew that across the entire kindergarten that I had been reading the most books, right, and doing those activities. And when we got to the end of the school year, my mother was getting dressed to go to an award ceremony for the kids. And I said, well, I should be getting the reading award. We've been talking about whoever's in the front wins. And my mom said, well, you're not getting that award. Someone else from the kindergarten class is getting it. And I was so upset because it did not make sense to me how I could be told for a whole school year that whoever's in the front gets this big award. And I'm like, well, my cub is in the front. That should be me. My mother tried to convince me not to go. I went anyway. And we kind of stood in the back, and I watched the person who was called. She was in my class. She was not a student of color. She was a young white girl. And the teacher ultimately decided that because I spent time in the corner or out in the hallway, that diminished what I had done academically, when the criteria the entire time was only about what you did academically. And I remember my mother having to tell me something, and it was at that moment I realized that I had to do something different. And she said that you're Black, you're a girl, and we don't have money and wealth. And so you're going to have to work 3 times harder than everyone else. You're going to have to put in 3 times as much work. She said, but I unfortunately have to tell you, you're also going to have to expect half the recognition when you do put in the work. And I remember being angry about that. And so at that point for me, I knew that wasn't something that I was going to be willing to accept. And that if I put in 3 times the work, I was going to get all the recognition that came with it. And that I was going to do that by any means necessary, even if that meant telling my teacher, no, this is exactly what it needed to be. And so that was really my first introduction to being rebellious. And it has most certainly followed me all of my days, as my grandmother would tell me.
Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your stories. I think that the power of this really lends itself so much to thinking about courage. And I also love that each of you comes from such a different field. We've got journalism, we've got DEI work, right? Like we've got all these different backgrounds. And I just think all of us require a great deal of courage sometimes to keep going and doing the work that we're doing. So each of you are disrupting your respective fields and pushing past barriers. What gives you the courage to engage in your work?
I will be honest, I don't think I've ever considered it as courage until you just asked this question. It's never seemed like courage, but an act of survival. And if I want to survive and be healthy and not just survive, if I want to thrive, there are going to be things that I'm going to just have to do that just haven't been done, that may not have an example. And so I've never looked at that as courage. I looked at that as survival. But I can also see how actions that you take to survive can be courageous. I'm going to have to sit with that one a little bit. Thank you very much, Dr. Bird, for now bringing something for me to sit with. But truly, I've never considered it courage. I've considered it survival.
I'm going to agree. Like, I think about my time at CNN in particular. I was living in New York City, and like it's expensive to live there. And I knew that I had to move up the ladder in order to continue living there. And so I had to do more than everyone else. And I was really fueled by anger. I'm not even going to lie about that. Like, I was angry at them consistently telling me like all the metrics that they use to define what's a good story I was meeting or exceeding, but I couldn't get past this job while Billy in the corner was writing like one story every month that no one read and was making 6 figures. And you would ask why, because I'm bold, and like I asked why, and he was like, well, he has a family. I'm like, because you're funding him to have a family. I can't have a family because I can't afford it, but you're funding him, which is what you're saying is the white boy needs to produce more children, which means he needs to make money, but the poor little Black girl shouldn't be making that money because we don't need more of her.
Ooh.
We don't. And I'm not sure. I don't like I don't really think that they were like working it through their heads that much, because oppression and that kind of stuff it's not thought through especially when it's woven into our culture in such a way. It's just the way it is. So they don't really think about the cause and effect of what they're doing and how they're continuing to foster inequality just by like not promoting someone because you're not comfortable with it.
That is so powerful. Like, that just gave me the total chill. Like, yeah. So I'm really curious what you all think is broken about the DEI framework, and what is one thing that you would change about it?
Since you made it clear I was a DEI practitioner, I feel like I should go first. Where I think we miss the mark are in two main places. One, this concept that having a focus to actually enforce equitable practices is something that requires anything other than actual empathy and compassion. This framework that I have to be convinced that someone deserves to have a space, and that convincing requires that I attach it to profits and loss, or that I attach it to a risk assessment, or that I attach it to some other normal business function or practice. The reality is we are not talking about a business function or practice. We are talking about a person. We are talking about a community. We are talking about a culture. We are talking about basic human life. And when we're looking at DEI in the workplace to me is the most untapped space for civil rights work. Not in the sense that we are fighting to have a space and that there are now legal ramifications and laws that are on the books that says you can't discriminate. That fight was done on the outside of the workplace, right? The workplace had to respond to that. But the workplace has had this ability to do the bare minimum of just following the law. And now we're at a framework to say that's not good enough. And oftentimes in DEI, what I hear over and over again is two things. That's not what we've done before, or we're doing that. It's just taking time. And what I always respond to is that if you took this much time in any other business function of your organization would cease to exist. And yet what you need to have existing in your organization are people. And you have chosen to populate the workplace and overpopulate communities. For what reason at all? Right? It makes me often think about, I think, Melissa, you and I talked about this a long time ago. There was a tweet, and I hate that I can't remember the person who tweeted it. And if I can find it, I'll retweet it. But the person tweeted something to the effect of, you are sitting in your current seat in a home, in a town, in a city, in a state, in a country, on this globe that's somehow being suspended in midair for millions of years. And this is how you decided to wake up every day and treat people, right? If I think about that, that is what's wrong with the DEI framework. It's because we all forget how finite and fragile we are in that seat. And what I think is happening is that we're seeing a disruption of, it's not just about a seat anymore. The seat was your point for power. That chair doesn't mean anything for me. So when you ask me or say people deserve a seat at the table, why would I want to sit in a seat of someone who occupied it in that manner? I don't want to occupy that seat if that seat has that energy in it, right? So like my girl, Miss Chisholm, I'm going to bring my own chair. So you can move yours out of the way. I'm going to bring my own because I'm bringing something different to this table that this table hasn't seen. In fact, I don't even want to be at the table. Let's just start something different. And oftentimes with DEI framework, it's just chiseling away at what exists rather than saying, let's just start over, right? Let's build something that we haven't seen before. So that's how I look at that. And I think the rebellion connects because when you tell someone, I don't want a seat at your table, I will bring my own seat and chair. You meet me here. You're saying, I'm not sitting in this chair to fulfill what you wanted. I am bringing in a chair to fulfill what's needed. And that may not be what you and I are going to share the same table about.
I just love it when you take me to church, Miss Crystal. I just love it so damn much. It makes me so damn happy. So good.
The thing about the table and not wanting to sit at it, that was sort of my trajectory in newsrooms. I realized very quickly I didn't want to be in the newsroom anymore. Not that I didn't want to do journalism. I didn't want to be in that space because the space is violent and I didn't want to subject myself to it. And I don't do strict DEI work. What I do is I go to newsrooms and I teach them how to cover disability. When I get there, I am usually met with, we're here for our sensitivity training. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. And I don't do that. So you are in the wrong room, but you should stay because I'm going to teach some other things. And what I teach is how to cover stories, how to cover the disability community. And a lot of what I'm teaching is, here's where you missed. Here's where you missed. I'm constantly saying, you missed all of this. The way you report these stories is backwards and broken. Disability, everyone is disabled or is going to be disabled at some point in your life. Unless you die very, very young, you're going to have a disability. You're going to age into it. So you're telling these stories like disabled people are separate people without the intersections of who they are. And I start throwing out facts like Black and Indigenous populations have the highest amount of disability. Have you explored why? Well, no. Right. No. So what stories are you telling when you're doing this? And that's, in my work, that's how it's not whatever that normal way that they're reporting stories. I don't talk to them about that. And I don't sit at their table because I don't like the table and I think the table's violent. I'm not ever going to do that. And I think that DEI in these corporations is so often like checkboxing, like just like they walk in and say, I'm coming here for my sensitivity training. Well, somebody misinformed you because you're not here. That's not what we're doing. But like, they're already prepared to ignore you. That's what the sensitivity word is saying. I'm here. I get it. I'm not supposed to say the R word anymore. Okay, got it. I have an important story to do. So hurry up with your time because I don't have time for this. And they're just, and I think it has to do with the educational system and everything. No one is really prepared to look at the connections to white supremacy that all of our industries participate in, or else white supremacy wouldn't be here still if we were really working on it.
So great. I really love what you said about sensitivity training and how it ties into what Crystal said about empathy and compassion, right? Like doing this work really requires seeing humanity and seeing human beings. And the minute we call it sensitivity, anything, it was over before it even began.